this strange Les Paul is gonna make you money. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, today I finally get to document the Gibson Les Paul Money Bass. Alright, this is like no Les Paul that you've probably ever seen before, but I'm going to explain it to you real quick here, and then I think you're going to go, oh, okay, that's why it's a Les Paul. Despite not actually having the Les Paul model silkscreen on the headstock, that's just what they called it, okay? So to understand this one, we need to talk about the original Gibson Les Paul signature. No, not that one. That's just the Les Paul model. I'm talking the Les Paul signature. It's this thing. It's a weird gold top that's a semi-hollow, kind of like a 335, but slightly offset. It was part of the low impedance series, you know, the Les Paul Personal, Les Paul Professional, Les Paul Recording. The one most people don't know about is the Les Paul Signature. And the Les Paul Signature also had a bass version that was later famously used by Jack Cassidy of Jefferson Airplane. So, you see this body shape, and now you see this bass. Do you kinda see it now? Yeah, that's why this thing is technically a Les Paul in a weird roundabout way. I mean, it's got this beautiful flame maple top. They have this interesting cutaway right here on the front, which you don't normally find on a lot of Gibson basses. And another unique feature about these is they are a full scale length bass, similar to like a Thunderbird. So it's not a short scale bass like the EB series typically is, when talking about the SG style body format anyways. But these were part of Gibson's Guitar of the Week series. This particular one was week number 7. However, there were actually 2 as part of the Guitar of the Week series. So the one we're talking about today is called Manhattan Midnight. It's a nice blue all gloss finish. Number 23 was done up in a natural finish. It makes the cutaway and transition into the mahogany body along the edge here a lot more apparent, and those ones were done up in a satin finish. So what's the biggest difference between the blue one and the natural? It comes down to the finish style. The blue ones have the gloss, the natural ones have a satin finish. However, before owning this, I didn't realize there was one other difference that the natural has, and that's why it was the same price. It has a middle layer of walnut wood, which I'm not seeing present on this blue one, but the finish is very dark. But even on the workbench and the pickup cavities later on, I did not see that additional layer of wood. And you might also see a root beer colored one or a red one. Those are not official money basses. There was the Les Paul double cut bass slightly before this guitar. I suppose we should talk about the second half of the name. Why is it also called the money bass? Well, Gibson just decided to put a cash money dollar sign on our truss rod cover. For whatever reason, people replaced that. Can you believe it? Like, I can understand putting it in the case and putting something more traditional on, but completely removing it and throwing it away is just silly. Just like putting a dollar sign on your bass is also kind of silly. I don't know. It's always been a strange model. I've wanted to document it, and I was happy I finally found a good price on one of these from a well-respected dealer, and unfortunately, they shipped it in that oversized box. They didn't pack it well, and I've got a crack on the side. So it kind of stemmed off the nut just a little bit. That's what this outline is. That's nothing to worry about, but it's when it comes down from there, that's almost always actually in the wood. But let's continue the review anyways. Being a Guitar of the Week means they made 400 of each of these colors, which is actually quite a lot of basses. As far as what I can tell online, these were around $1,189 brand new, but they got blown out as cheap as $600. So it seems like maybe dealers had a hard time selling these at first. Which for that price, coming with a hard shell case, I mean, it kind of seems like a steal. I mean, check out this ridiculously huge case compartment. Oh man, I think I've got some original case candy here. Truss rod tool, owner's manual, matching paperwork, and I think, oh yeah, original sales receipt showing this one sold for $800. So not the cheapest price I've ever heard for one of these brand new, but a good price nonetheless. Nowadays, they pretty typically sell in that $1,000 to $1,500 range, but they can go all the way up to $2,000 in mint condition. They're not necessarily super popular or collectible, but they are just weird oddities. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take a look at its parts and specs. Alright, out of respect for the base, it was too filthy to review any further, so I decided to clean it up, but we're gonna learn an interesting lesson here. You see how the finish has like a permanent haze in this area? This is a very good lesson about nitro finishes. You really shouldn't use hand sanitizers, bug sprays, or mosquito repellents if you're gigging with an instrument like this and you care that the finish might get hazed over, or you really need to make sure you clean it off afterwards. Because that's what causes this permanent haze right here, whereas the rest of the finish is nice and glossy, it kind of almost gets slightly matted over, and that's after doing a slight scratch remover. I'm not sure if a more aggressive buffing compound might get that out a little bit more, but that is something to know, especially the hand sanitizers, because you see it on forums all the time. Some guys just put it on because that's what they normally do, then they go to play their instrument, they're like, hey, what happened to my finish? The world of nitro finishes. But anyways, this blue flame top really came to life. It's looking great now. I just love this little cutaway right here. You can see just how thick the maple top is. It's interesting how it just kind of carves into the mahogany body. Slightly reminds me of the Gibson M3 Deluxe series. But let's go ahead and check out these pickups. So they're looking like humbuckers. We've got some scratches on the exterior of them, but there's no actual markings on them, but they appear to be epoxy coated. So our spec sheets call them the TB Plus pickups. I assume that stands for Thunderbird Plus, and these are ceramic humbuckers. It's the same for the neck and the bridge position. As far as our cavities, they're looking like this. Again, you can see the maple top and the mahogany body. Some sort of a marking right here, MM, likely for Manhattan Midnight. That's your finish code. And I don't see anything in the bridge. But before we get our readings, we need to talk about our control layout. You're going to notice we do not have a toggle switch on this, so it's running it kind of Fender style. You've got a volume for your neck, you've got a volume for your bridge, and then you have a master tone. So right now with both of them on full on, it's 4.67, so that's like your traditional middle pickup. But if we turn our neck off, we get just the bridge reading, which is about 9k ohms. Then we can also do the opposite here, granting us 9.08k ohms. Then of course you can get everywhere in between. I don't know if I'm going to go that crazy in the demo though. But if you like to tinker with tones, sometimes setups like these work out really great. Now, unfortunately, the pressure of the bridge actually chipped the finish right here. Now, that was before I took it off. I was actually able to see that, but I just thought that was like a reflection. I was quite shocked when that was the end result. But you can see the bridge gets secured by 4 screws, and then that's your grounding tab right here. This bridge is chunky. I think it's complete brass, and it's just plated in chrome. This thing weighs 10.7 ounces. But at the very least, the saddles on here are made of brass. And they just have a set screw right here, so you use your Allen key to loosen that, and then you can set this to wherever it needs to be, and then you tighten it down and it stays in place. And the ball end of the strings go down here. This bass is definitely rather small feeling. I'd say it's about 16 inches long from the highest horn, and at the widest about 13 inches. I'm curious, is this 9 up here? If you count it from here to there, yes, so maybe that's another reason why they called it a Les Paul bass. It borrows the Les Paul dimensions. Which, by the way, if you're not familiar, there actually is a Les Paul bass in the shape of it and called that, even before the Triumph basses of the 70s. But besides that area of dulled down finish, we've got a ding right here. A couple of small dings in this area too. And this looks more like a Gibson thing, a little bit of a finish not completely covering over the maple top around the join area. But now let's move on to our rosewood fretboard. It's looking good, but my goodness, it feels like this thing just goes on for days and days and days. I think it feels that way because the body is kind of small on this. But it is a full-scale 34-inch bass, as we were talking about earlier. And not only that, but it has a full 2-octave scale, 24 frets. And it's supposed to have your regular 12-inch fretboard radius. We've got a nut width of 1.6 inches. By the 12th, that increases it to 2.17. I guess for fun, all the way up here, it's about 2.44. But our first fret neck depth is 0.84, then 0.96 by the 12th. So it's definitely a nice rounded C-shaped neck. Here's that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. You can just see it gets really wide and loses some of its carve. Now let me tell you, this truss rod would have freaked me out because it actually uses an Allen key for adjustment. But that was interesting to see another model that utilized that. We've got our Gibson logo up here, and it's strange that they call it a Les Paul on the spec sheets, but they didn't actually put the Les Paul model on it. But here's that money truss rod cover. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a prototype out there that just has a dollar sign as a silk screen or something. I think that would have made these pretty funny, but I totally get why they put it on a replaceable part. And it looks like we have a little bit of lacquer chipping around this tuner from all the pressure. Moving on to the backside, let's take a look at our control cavity. Looks like we've got our Gibson branded pots, as is common in this era. Everything's looking untouched to me here, but I thought this was fascinating. It looks like some sort of a compliance check mark that has a tree, an HSC or something like that. I've never seen that before. I guess since we measured it at the front, you might as well see how thick it is. It's about 1 3/4 inches. And we've got the output jack on the side with strap buttons in these 2 locations. And the back's in okay shape. Again, you can see the wood grain through the finish. You can also see a few light dipping areas. Maybe it wasn't sanded completely flush. And it got a couple of playwear dings and some scratches. And moving up the back side of the neck, not too much to really talk about here, except for this area right here. It feels so strange because it's very pronounced. Like they almost have a stinger-like shape, but like when you're playing in this area, you feel a very distinct ridge right here, and it doesn't really smooth out into an even curve until about right here, which is about where you start playing. I think most people would probably be right here, so you're never really going to notice that unless you're just like holding on to it. We've got our Grover tuners here, and then our serial number, dating this one to the 51st day of 2007. You can see there's a pretty nasty scratch right there. All said and done, it weighs 8 pounds, 7.8 ounces. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear some of these tones. Keep in mind, I'm running this through Logic Pro. I don't actually have a bass amp. All right, so that's like a guitar collecting dream come true, playing Money on the Money bass. I hope that kind of gave you some idea of the clean tones. It's actually a quite nice sounding bass. Now that we know all about the Gibson Les Paul Money Bass in Manhattan Blue, what are my final thoughts on this one? It's an interesting bass. It is definitely a little bit neck heavy here, unfortunately. You need about a pound of weight on the end of it to make it be perfectly level, and then you could play it just fine. I mean, it's not trying to go down to the floor, it's just want to sit perpendicular, so you only have to slightly support it. But I find the way that it naturally rests, the pickups are just really in my way. So I learned why the pickups were all smudged up when I first got this one, because that happened to me too when I just ended up playing it. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, I still haven't heard back from the shop after about 36 hours, so I don't know what the fate of this one is going to be. I really wish it wouldn't have gotten damaged during shipping, because yeah, I wanted one of these for my personal collection, so I guess the hunt continues. So no, not my favorite bass in the world. However, I still would suggest checking it out just because, you know, playing money on the money bass is just a lot of fun. It's kind of a quirky piece of Gibson history, and Gibson basses in general are not all that popular, so they're not quite as expensive as Fender offerings, especially when you can get a fun limited edition one for around $1,500-ish or so. But now that I know that the natural ones have that extra walnut layer, I definitely want to review and document one of those, so we'll play money again another day. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, how about you check out the history of the E.B. Gibson bass, when I documented one from the 60s in this episode.